Dude, now Peyton's out here just asking for money. Like, what? Like, yeah, I'm sure you need money now, don't you?
Yeah, that money's for affordable housing, though.
Yeah, I'm sure you want your fucking money, you fucking greedy sack of shit.
I apologize that I have to make this video, but circumstances are what they are, and currently I'm stranded in Georgia with my best friend, my editor, Jet, and we have no way and no money to get home. For reasons outside of my control, I am no longer a part of the AHP initiative, and with that came us being stranded here by the organizer of the AHP initiative. This is not an Unfuck America tour situation. This is not a Zico and Sanchez situation. This was an interpersonal conflict that apparently could not be resolved. I tried to resolve it, and the person involved did not want to resolve it and then chose to strand us here. In fact, to my knowledge, the AHP initiative is just what it is. It's an affordable housing initiative that is doing exactly what it says it's doing, and I have found no evidence that it's not. And this falling out has also caused me to lose the studio that I was going to be getting to film my videos in and keep pumping out more content, because I live in a very small apartment with my girlfriend, and this was about to be like a really big game changer for me and my content and my ability to do what I love. So that's all happening.
First and foremost, I want to start off by saying that the following video is not to take away from the voices of Tashika and many other Black creators who have spoken out against the Unfuck America tour. And if you guys don't know who that is Peyton. And Peyton is a popular TikToker here who is part of the Unfuck America tour and also its downfall at the very first version 1.0. This is the same creator that stood on their platform and broke down the microaggressions and the toxicity of the tour when it came down to Black creators. With that being said, the following information that I have is truly disturbing, and these allegations are really fucking wild. And to process everything that I've learned this morning has been incredibly difficult. This is exactly why we need to be very, very careful about who we are platforming and who we are supporting, and we need to do our due diligence to do our own research when it comes to content creators. But let's get into the allegations. In 2022, Peyton was arrested for attempted robbery towards a check cashing business that was owned by 3 Black women. Apparently, he handed them a note with a bag that said, "Put all of the money in the bag." And he was arrested on the street and claimed that he was falsely arrested and held 30 days, and he was going to sue the police department for falsely alleging that he was the one that robbed these 3 Black women. Last night at 1 o'clock in the morning, it became public knowledge that Peyton was arrested for an outstanding warrant for failure to appear in court for these said allegations last year. The video that I just showed you was posted hours before his arrest, asking for a GoFundMe to raise $10,000 to get him and his partner back from Georgia and to help him continue to fund filming content and doing what he does here on TikTok, because he was no longer part of the coalition that was helping raise money for affordable housing nationwide. He was arrested in the same county that he was accused of these crimes that he failed to show up to court for. If you guys know of who I am, I always like to do my due diligence, but I was handed a pile of receipts, which I have stitched into these videos as I'm continuing to talk. But these are readily available receipts that you can pull if you need them. I am truly disturbed of these allegations that are rising out against Peyton, and the fact that he posted a GoFundMe hours before his arrest that matches the same amount of money he needs for bail. And the only thing I can call out with is that he was truly innocent. I'm really unsure why he didn't use his platform to fight for his justice and sue the police department, as he said in a video originated in 2022. And for him to gain as much speed and communities as he has grown in the last couple months over all of this, why he never spoke out about this publicly again is my concern as a content creator. I believe that Peyton must speak on this and must tell everyone, his followers and anyone that donated to that GoFundMe, what the reality was and what the situation is. But again, there has been no trial and he has not been convicted of a crime. These are all allegations because we have a due justice system here in America, and due process is warranted, and he has to go through these allegations, and we have to see what the court decides. I'm truly fucking disturbed by all of this, and this is not anything to do with the left eating the left or anything to that. This is This is why we have a problem with social media and not doing our due process as Americans to vet the people that we're trying to follow. And just because they have a large number does not always make them equal to a good person. And now I'm not saying Peyton is good nor bad, because again, there has been no trial and he has not been convicted of a crime. But these allegations are incredibly serious and incredibly disturbing.
Hello, I am Jet. I am Peyton's friend that he posted about yesterday in the video, crowd raising mutual aid to get back home.
With my best friend, my editor, Jet.
Peyton didn't have a Cash App, so my Cash App is the one that we used because we both had $0 in our bank account at the time. I was brought on to the AHP tour with Peyton and other creators that were involved. Unless specifically stated otherwise, I was present for everything that I am talking about in this video. I witnessed the altercation that occurred with the AHP that led him to be separated. I witnessed Peyton's arrest, and I am currently filming this on his phone, which he gave to me after being arrested. I'm going to give comment to the best of my ability, as I think that is what is out here, and there is a lot of misinformation being spread about Peyton right now. As I said, I was also a part of the AHP tour. It was an idea since before the Unfuck America controversy and had been in talks for quite a while until starting on the 16th of this month. The conflict started with the overall technical and general failure of the AHP planned 24/7 live stream. Throughout everyone that was involved in the tour, this became a massive interpersonal conflict. A lot of people disagreeing with each other about what the right way to go about it was. And if you don't already know, the goal was to host a series of events to raise money for affordable housing with the Affordable Housing Project and Initiative. So I'm going to attempt to give you the clearest possible timeline of everything that has occurred, as well as give you all factually correct information regarding this entire situation. At a certain point during the tour, there was beginning to be interpersonal conflicts between a variety of people, but more specifically between Peyton and the lead of the tour and organization, Corvon. And again, as stated yesterday in Peyton's video, none of this is relating to the organization as a whole, and the fallout was solely interpersonally, and Corvon's responsibility was handing the real estate side of a affordable housing project to which, as Peyton stated, there is no evidence he is failing to do so. The project is very much still on. There was nothing wrong with the affordable housing project. As we attempted to state as clearly as possible yesterday, this is not an Unfuck America situation. This is not Zico and Sanchez. This is an interpersonal conflict that happened between Peyton and Corvon. To give a small amount of context, Corvon had begun to take specific issue with things that were being said in conversation on the tour. More specifically, he had been talking about the fact that he didn't care anybody's opinion about him and he did not value what anyone thought of him, as his sole purpose was being a businessman and being in charge of the real estate side of both his company and the Affordable Housing Initiative. For a variety of reasons, Peyton disagreed with this, and they had several discussions about the implications of the statements that Corvon was making, but it never left interpersonal. On Wednesday, May 21st, this month, these conversations escalated into the final argument that they would have about these topics. Me and Peyton were trying to hang out outside, as there was a part of the house that was detached from the rest and had things like projectors and a pool table that we were going to go see. After about 15 minutes, I realized that Peyton was not coming back outside, and I entered the house where Corvon and Peyton were sitting at the table discussing this again. It later found out that Corvon had urged Peyton to start drinking. He had given him around 7 shots of tequila, and Corvon began asking Peyton what his opinions of him were. Because while he had maintained that he didn't care about what anyone had to say about him, he had also said to me and Peyton both personally that if we had any grievances or any concerns, that we should bring them directly to him and should not worry about whether or not he is paying us. We should be open and candid with him about our opinions. At this point, me and the photographer on the tour, Mason, who are both 20 years old, sat down at the table, and Corvon also urged us not to leave the table and to begin drinking. The 4 of us collectively drank the rest of the bottle of tequila, and Corvon DoorDashed more alcohol, in which he still urged us not to leave the table and to continue drinking. Along this time, Corvon had started talking along with his cousin, who is a business associate of Corvon, and was responsible for the booking of the Airbnb and several levels of organizing for the AHP tour. A flight was booked with Peyton and I to Washington, D.C. The problem with that is that neither Peyton nor I live in Washington, D.C. Peyton lives in Pittsburgh. We had originally met in Washington, D.C., and Peyton's girlfriend who drove us there had to borrow her mom's car in order to get us there, as hers has mechanical issues that would have prevented that drive. And by this point, we had no way of getting back from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. I also, at this point in the conversation, made it clear to Peyton that he had previously used his ID and social security card to get through TSA, and that after Real ID becoming effect, he would not be able to do that. And I informed him that after Real ID becoming effect, that he would not be able to board a flight to Washington, D.C., which again would have still done nothing for us getting home. Corvon later stressed that he was aware we had quite a long conversation about whether Peyton would be able to fly or not, yet the flight was still booked. Corvon continued to press Peyton about what his opinions of him were, and eventually Peyton gave a criticism that went too far. I'm not going to disclose what the criticism was, as it clearly affected Corvon personally. This is where the altercation really started, because from this point there was a clear shift in attitude from Corvon, and he was clearly bothered by the statements that Peyton had made. Peyton had said throughout the conversation that he did believe Corvon was a good person, but was trying to point out that regardless, every person does have flaws. Corvon then prompted Peyton by saying, "You don't know who I am," to which Peyton said, "I do though," and Corvon responded, "I will show you who I am." Neither me or Peyton caught the shift in behavior from Corvon. We believe that the conversation was still civil and was still genuine. Corvon proceeded to go get his cousin and his bodyguard and went up to Peyton and told him that he had to leave the house. He gave Peyton 10 minutes to get his things out of the house and continue the conversation while updating how much time he had left to leave. He pointed out that Corvon had been counting down the timer too fast and had passed around 4 minutes when only about a minute and a half at most had passed. At a certain point during this whole interaction, Corvon decided to call the police, despite it being widely accepted that it would be highly inappropriate to do so in a house full of black people. He also continued to say that Peyton had to leave the house, stating that it didn't matter, he had paid for it with his money, and that if he said Peyton had to go, that he had to go. It came up about a minute and a half later that the Airbnb was actually under Corvon's cousin's name, who, after a bit more of interaction, told Peyton to just go upstairs and lay down. Peyton then went upstairs and Corvon's cousin went to go check on him. I was walking up the stairs when I heard Corvon's cousin yelling, who also had gone up to check on Peyton, that he was throwing up. I cleaned up the vomit and went back downstairs to try to mediate the situation, as I was still under the impression that it was a drunken interaction that would be resolved peacefully in the morning. I went back downstairs and started talking with Corvon, at which point someone who witnessed the situation since said it is when they decided to completely leave the tour, as they said, quote, "I was not being talked to like a human being." At this point, the officer had come downstairs and informed Corvon that Peyton was in no state to leave the house, and since it was not in his name, and the person whose name it was in advised him to not leave the house, that she could not legally force him to leave. Corvon was incredibly disrespectful and angry throughout the entire situation, and was saying that he pretty much didn't care about anything that I had to say. The conversation prompted someone else on the tour to decide that very clearly the tour is over if this is the type of interactions that are going to be happening, and thought that we should start making a trip back to drive everyone back to their home states. I was told by Corvon's cousin that we had a very little amount of time to pack and be ready to leave before the date that we had to exit the Airbnb. However, when we woke up the next morning, everyone had since left. The entire house, with the exception of me and Peyton, was completely empty. We found out a little bit later that around 4 a.m. people were woken up and told that everyone was leaving the Airbnb except for me and Peyton. We explained to him that not only did we have no means of boarding the plane, as Peyton did not have a valid passport or an updated Real ID, but we also had no transport to the airport, and our flight was to somewhere where we did not live. We began asking for transport to the state where we actually were going to end up at. It was abundantly clear at this point that the tour's main plan was done. Corvon pretty much declined to do so. He said that he had filled his obligation of what he had to do in order to get us home. We disagreed with that. We instead then asked just to be compensated for our work on the tour and be paid early, since it seemed to us like we were splitting ways. And our plan was, at the very least, to use our pay from the tour to get ourselves home. Corvon also declined this and said that we would get paid on the same schedule as everybody else, despite the fact that we had been left. He also pointed out to us at this time that he had to calculate and deduct the cost of the food that he bought for us on this trip. This is something that was never mentioned to us prior to this conflict. He had made very clear that even separate from the AHP, he had a lot of philanthropic efforts in which he would help people out, and he told us several times, everyone has to eat, all you have to do is ask. We were not once informed that This was going to be deducted from our pay that we received. He also began questioning overall elements of me and Peyton's pay. He claimed that we never came to a conclusion about my own pay. He said Peyton didn't meet the goals that he had to in order for him to get paid. Overall, it seemed as if we were going to get nothing from him in terms of transportation. Overall argument ensued throughout the day between me, Peyton, and Corvon, and we tried to figure out what the plan was going to be. We offered several different options for how we could get home, and he denied all of them, at which point we decided to make the GoFundMe and make that video that he posted yesterday. We had already made that GoFundMe with the intention of what we stated in that video. The 10,000 was a relatively random but also calculated number based on the loss that Peyton was not able to receive from the deal that had presumably fallen out due to the conflict that he had with Corvon. We posted the video, started receiving a couple of donations, and were overall very ecstatic that we were going to get to go back home. Within 30 minutes, the cops knocked at the door. I was asked where Peyton was and then quickly pushed aside as about 8 officers entered the Airbnb. I was handcuffed and being brought to a chair outside when I heard screaming, mostly from the officers. They were yelling at him, saying to get on the ground, to put his hands behind his back, to stop resisting, as well as all of them screaming over each other. The only thing that I heard from Peyton at this point was in response to "I'm resisting," to which he said "I'm not." The screaming continued, and I genuinely believed that Peyton was about to be unalived by these officers. Luckily, he was not, and a few minutes later, he was brought outside in handcuffs. I was escorted with an officer upstairs to give them my ID, as well as, again, to go up and get Peyton's medication. Around this time, I also gave Peyton my phone number and other phone numbers that were necessary, and he gave me the password to his phone. He was escorted off and has been in jail since. The arrest is not for robbery, it is for failure to present, and it is after an incident that occurred in 2022. This is, to the best of my knowledge, what had occurred with that. He was stopped by officers and told that he met a description of someone that they were looking for. He offered to show video evidence of where he was, as well as connect them with people who could verify that information. The police officer seemingly went along with it and asked him to come down to the station to answer some questions, when promptly Peyton was arrested and jailed for 30 days waiting for a court date. At the end of those 30 days, Peyton was released. Since that incident in 2022, Peyton was awaiting a court date for this hearing where he could prove that he was not at all involved in this incident. Peyton wanted to pursue legal action at the time, but could not because the situation and the case was still technically ongoing. He moved and never received any form of a notice of a court date. Kept in contact with his bail officer, calling him frequently. Even through that, never received any call, text, email, letter, or any form of notification that his court date had been presented. This is what Peyton is being arrested for. Not presenting for court for a case that would very likely prove that he was not involved in the crime that he was falsely arrested for. And again, when we made that video, we had no intention of using the funds to bail Peyton out of jail because we didn't know that Peyton was going to be arrested. Peyton did not and could not have filmed that video while he was in jail or knew the cops were looking for him. We were not notified of this, but the police were at the comedy event that Peyton had been advertising on his social media. Corvon then told him the address of the Airbnb we had been staying at, and the police arrived shortly after. Being arrested for failure to present after being wrongly arrested and jailed for 30 days. The fundraiser was for Peyton to obtain the studio that he lost through the deal with Corvon falling through.
So this is my Venmo and Jets Cash App. They'll also be in my bio. If you guys want to help us get home like immediately, that would help. And if you want to help us get the money back for my rent and help us acquire the studio space, my GoFundMe is in my bio.
The Venmos and Cash Apps were for immediate help to get us home, as GoFundMe donations would have taken time to process and get to our bank accounts, which we would have only received after we would have already had to be out of the Airbnb. People who are commenting on the fact that the GoFundMe's goal is $10,000, the exact amount of Peyton's bail. Peyton does not currently have bail because he's being arrested for failure to present for a court case. That means that he does not have a bail. He needs to present in court so that he can prove he did not commit this crime. This is not for bail, this is for Peyton to be able to combat these charges that he was faced with senselessly. I am unsure how much longer Peyton is going to remain in jail, and I'm not sure if I've addressed everybody's concerns with this video. If you have anything else, comment it, and if there's enough, I will try to make another comment before Peyton is released. And once again, this conflict had absolutely nothing to do with the AHP initiative, its project, or anything related to it. It was a drunken, petty argument that was handled interpersonally. Please realize that all of the criticism that you are levying towards Peyton right now, to be clear, the criticism that everyone is currently throwing at Peyton is not going to him. It is going to the people closely related to him in his actual life. People who are stressing nonstop trying to navigate this situation. Also, if you were trying to send money to the Cash App, apparently my Cash App hit a limit of what it could receive, and a lot of them have been getting declined. I'm working on fixing this right now, but I'll post an update if that happens. Hello, I am Jet. I am Peyton's friend. If you haven't already seen the video that I uploaded a couple of days ago explaining this entire situation, this is an update video. You might notice that I'm in a car. Yes, due to the donations that we received, we have now gotten a car, and his girlfriend is now here from Pittsburgh in order to try to get him out of jail. As of this point forward, we are not in Georgia because of the AHP. We are not stranded in Georgia because of the AHP. We are still kind of stranded in Georgia, but it is no longer because of the AHP that is the case. And you might be saying, you're not stuck there anymore, just go home. I am so sorry if you think for 1 second that I am going to leave my friend in a jail where they are known to keep people without a court date. I don't know what to tell you. I am absolutely not doing that. I am not going to leave my friend in jail. I want to get him out. I want to get my friend out of jail. I don't know how much more I can stress that. I'm going to be covering a lot in this video. Here's timestamps of the topics that I'm going to be going over, as well as clarifying the timeline, adding things that I left out of that initial video. And I just want to preface all of that by saying the statements that I'm going to be making about AHP and Corvon in this video are not in any attempt to bring him down or bring down the AHP. I've made excessively clear that me and Peyton still both fully believe in the AHP. They've made clear that they're fine moving forward with us in the future. Because these situations have now been interlinked with Peyton's arrest, I feel the need that they have to be clarified so people can stop spreading misinformation. Even Corvon has corroborated that the things being said about Peyton online right now, specifically the interactions that led to us being removed from the tour, are just fucking not true. You guys don't know what the fuck is happening, and it is absurd that any of this even has to be said, but it is being made much more difficult because of the things that are being said. Again, these are just real people in Peyton's fucking life that are trying to navigate this situation, and it's just being made harder and harder for no reason. All I am trying to do is get my friend out of jail. Any claims that I'm trying to do some nefarious shit or trying to do some PR cover-up are full of shit. I want to get my friend out of jail. Right now, Peyton is sitting in Fulton County Jail, a jail that has gained a reputation for keeping people, specifically black people, without court dates, awaiting a trial where they can actually be convicted of a crime if they are guilty or not. People in Fulton County Jail are often kept there for much longer times than they should be, await court dates, and are not even given the chance to prove in court and on trial if they are guilty. Often people will overserve their prison sentences in jail for crimes that they don't even know if they have been committed for yet. So in 2022, a cash loan or credit cashing place was robbed, and the next day, Peyton was stopped on the street because he met a profile. Peyton matched the description of the person who allegedly committed this crime. As I discussed in the previous video, Peyton kept in very common contact with his bail officer awaiting a court date. He had no prior knowledge to any court date being set, and that's why he had no aversion to coming to Atlanta, because he was not aware there was a warrant out for his arrest. He made it clear to me earlier that day that if we did obtain a rental car, that he wanted to get a court date resolved while he was in Georgia. And from all conversations that myself and his girlfriend have had with both him and Fulton County, the only thing Peyton needs to do right now to get out is have an attorney to get a proceeding. If Peyton has a proceeding and has a court hearing, he will be released. This is what Fulton County uses to keep people in jail awaiting court dates, because they don't have the money for attorneys. So now I'm going to re-clarify the timeline of everything that happened that led up to the separation of Peyton and the AHP. This is not in any attempt to put them down or make claims about them. This is to clarify from my accounts that this is what happened. If the AHP feels any need to make any comments to clarify and they feel like they need to stick up for themselves, they're more than free to do that. I have no problem with that. But I have to give my and Peyton's side of the story when it is being lied about. So that's what I'm going to do. I'd very much wish that these situations were not interlinked on social media, but they now are. So pretty much every interaction that was negative about the tour started with the fact that there was a little bit of the lack of understanding and organization between everyone involved in the tour, not just Corvon. To my knowledge, and this is something that I was going to be responsible for, we were going to be doing a 24/7 live stream with Fabo, a popular streamer who was involved in the project. And the first day of this stream went absolutely horribly. I had kind of stressed that I needed about 12 hours at least to set up all the equipment, make sure it was running smoothly, and make sure that any live stream that we had was going to be secure and no technical issues were going to arise off the bat. But this isn't how that ended up going. Me and Peyton and his girlfriend borrowed his girlfriend's mom's car, and we drove out to Washington, D.C. And from Washington, D.C., we drove to New Jersey, where we were at an Airbnb. So I had roughly 2 or 3 hours where I was working on this live stream, pretty much on the fly, trying to get the stream set up and make sure that everything was working, make sure all the mics were connected. Corvan had set a deadline and was getting a little bit upset that things kept getting pushed back. He wanted the stream started as soon as possible. It was then sprung onto both me and Fabo, the streamer, that the live stream was going to be taking place on her Twitch stream. I was under the impression that it was going to be on an AHPI Twitch. Fabo was also not aware that it was going to be streamed on her Twitch. This is the first example of everyone kind of not being sure, despite the meetings that we had, what was supposed to be happening, a lack of communication between everyone involved. But this led to tension, specifically with Corvan, Fabo, and Peyton, about what the problems with the tour were and why things were going wrong and where to proceed. I ended up having to start the stream on Fabo's Twitch. I put up a black screen with a window capture of her YouTube with YouTube videos of hers playing, barely able to set up anything in OBS, just trying to get the stream running, doing things on the fly. I was setting up overlays, I was setting up donation links, literally as the stream was already live. Again, because this has been questioned, this is relevant because it is what led to the conflict, that led to Peyton's fucking arrest. And these two situations are now, for some reason, connected, and I have to say something about that. So, early in the day of the incident, me, Peyton, and Corvan were having a conversation about Kanye West. Me and Peyton were saying that it kind of sucks that Kanye is a horrible person because he was very creatively talented and had a lot of very, very amazing songs. This is when Corvan entered the conversation and sort of started defending Kanye West from the perspective of me and Peyton. He had said that he was not defending Kanye, but that's sort of where the conversation started. Saying that this is something he took to himself personally and that he didn't care what anyone said and that is something that led to his success. The conversations of cancel culture were relating to Peyton and to the Unfuck America Tour controversy and saying that it would never happen to Corvan and that even when it happened to Z, that it was a very minuscule effect. Corvan said this is because he's a businessman and said several times throughout the tour that any business that he did was separated completely from social media shit. He had said several times that he could make a phone call and have a deal and make $40K in 2 weeks, and that social media had no impact on him and his business. And he used this to say that cancellation didn't matter to him. Peyton shifted the conversation back to Kanye West and said that, well, Kanye West is selling swastika fucking t-shirts, so there's kind of a problem with that people should be holding him accountable for. It was around this time that Corvan had started referencing Peyton's controversy with the Unfuck America Tour, saying that if you want, you guys can record this. We didn't feel any need to at the time because at the time, as we were stating, we did think Corvan was a good person, and we still do. But Peyton had said that the not really caring about what people think and not being able to be canceled does not apply to being a Nazi. It does not apply to making swastika t-shirts. We ended up having a conversation relating to morality and our core beliefs, and Corvan had said that he didn't have trust in people because people were pieces of shit. Corvan had said that he felt that me and Peyton would personally betray him. Personally, I felt like he was baiting Peyton and I into making a video or having some sort of drama, or overall trying to get Peyton to make a video calling him out publicly. Peyton was getting more and more annoyed with Corvan's defending of Kanye and his behavior. Peyton made it very clear that he did not see Corvan in a negative way, and made it clear that he had no intention whatsoever of making any form of video about Corvan. This is when the interaction started later that night. As I said, I was waiting outside for Peyton to come and hang out, and I realized at a certain point that Peyton was not going to be coming back outside. Corvan had been saying that me and Peyton were afraid to say anything because he was paying us and that we weren't giving him our real opinions. This is when Corvan started urging me to drink. He told me to sit down and poured me a glass, and I started drinking along with Peyton, who was already 7 shots deep of tequila. Corvan asked again and asked Peyton repeatedly to, quote, say it in regards to his opinions of Corvan specifically. Peyton prefaced this with the fact that he did not see Corvan in a negative light and that Simply, as a 24-year-old, he had room to grow, Peyton himself saying that even as a 26-year-old, he still also had room to grow and things to unpack. Corvon interrupted that and asked Peyton to name specifics, which he did. Peyton had brought back up the organizational problems that had led to the failure of the stream both in New Jersey, New York City, and Washington, D.C. He brought back up the conversation that he had about Kanye. Most of all, Peyton brought up that he had a tendency of being disrespectful to women, and more specifically black women. At this point, Peyton referenced a conversation that had taken place between Peyton and Corvon, and this conversation was about a mutual of Peyton's, Tashika. Corvon had said that he might have liked Tashika as a person, but that he overall disliked her lives a lot. I specifically remember him calling her loud and saying that she was annoying and that he did not like her lives at all despite liking her videos. I remember him saying that she behaves a lot like Dean. I remember him saying that he felt like she behaved in the people that she was trying to disagree with. Because of this, Peyton stated that Corvon might have some internalized misogyny. He stated that it is to be expected because he lives in America, and it is because of the society and systems we engage with that Corvon probably has these beliefs. And again, this is something that Peyton was saying as an example to prove a larger point, but this is what Corvon was very personally upset about. Again, me and Peyton didn't catch the shift in behavior, but Corvon definitely was bothered by the statements that Peyton made about misogyny. Corvon began talking about his trauma, to which Peyton responded that he was proving his point. The conversation continued, and Corvon was stating that Peyton was not necessary for the tour, and that Corvon could have done it all himself with investors, and that Peyton brought nothing to the tour. Peyton said that if that was the case, that Corvon should have just called his investors and not asked Peyton to make videos asking for donations. He said that if Corvon was going to go to investors, that Peyton and Fabo should simply get paid for the donations that their audiences contributed to, and that the statement that he brought nothing to the tour was disrespectful to everyone who was working on this trip. I personally thought this was antithetical to the ads that I had written for Peyton about the AHP, because we had stated in the script that I wrote that there were no large investors. We were under the impression at this point that it was going to be crowdfunded and it was going to be raised through donations that Peyton and Fabo would advertise. The conversation was getting heated very fast. This was two grown men screaming things at each other to make each other mad. And I'd like to make it very clear that it was obvious who was more drunk in this situation. With Peyton and Corvon, this was, for lack of a better term, a dick measuring contest. This was two drunk men who were screaming at each other dumb things to make each other angry, and both of them were taking their words to the extreme, and this led to an escalation. At this point, the conversation was completely out of control. Corvon says Peyton and I are cut from his shit and have 10 minutes to gather our things and exit the Airbnb. Corvon looked at me and said that I'm sorry, but you're out too. He gives us 10 minutes to do this and starts counting down very fast. The conversation continued for a few minutes before Corvon sent me to go get Peyton's stuff. I had barely made it to the bottom of the stairs before I had fully broken down crying, sitting on the ground. Corvon noticed and said, "Is he crying?" and then came over and put his hand on my shoulder and started massaging my shoulder. After a minute, he had said that I still needed to go get Peyton's stuff. The operations manager, Janaya, who was Corvon's cousin, is the one who booked the Airbnb, and so she told Peyton that he did not have to leave and to just go upstairs and lay down. Peyton goes up to the room that me and him were staying in, and because of the amount of alcohol that he had consumed at this point, he began uncontrollably vomiting. I had gotten some paper towels and other things to clean up the vomit when I told Corvon that that's what I was doing so that he didn't incur any extra fees from the cleanup. He had said to me in a very rude way that everyone on the tour had already incurred him enough fees. This is something that Fabo had observed and pointed out later how disrespectful he was being to everyone. After cleaning everything up, I walked back downstairs again and started talking to Corvon, trying to reconcile the situation. I tried to explain things from Peyton's side as well as trying to come with a mutual understanding from the both of them. I know Peyton personally, and so I felt I had some insight for Corvon that could have de-escalated the situation. It turned into being a very odd conversation. Fabo overheard this conversation as well and said that I was not being spoken to like I was a person. She concluded at this point that because of the way that we were talking to each other that the tour was done and said that we should make a trip back to everyone's home states. I brought up some water for me and Peyton, laid down, and Janaya informed me that we had a very limited amount of time to pack, and I was under the conclusion that we were going to be leaving with Corvon and the rest of the team. I went to sleep, and at around 4 a.m. everyone was woken up and left the house. I was not notified at the time that people were leaving the house. I only found out at around 9 a.m. the next morning when there was nobody there. All of the rooms were cleared out, nothing was left behind, and me and Peyton were stranded there. I would like to point out that whether or not they stranded us, we were stranded there. We had no way of the both of us actually getting anywhere. The only thing that we had to go off of was a flight to Washington, D.C., which again, neither of us live in Washington, D.C. No method of doing that other than Janaya, who had texted us that while it was mostly out of her control and she didn't have much, that she would do what she could to help us if we needed anything. Throughout the day, several phone calls took place with me, Corvon, and Peyton. We attempted to figure out any way that we could actually get back to Pittsburgh. Like I stated in the previous video, video, we suggested a rental car or some format of travel that we could actually do. Corvon had stated that because he had bought us a flight to Washington, D.C., and that was where we met him, that he had no further obligation in getting us home. We then asked for our pay, and Corvon said that we would get paid on the same schedule as everybody else would. He also made it very clear that he was not going to give us anything, and that if we wanted anything, we had to, quote, file a claim. It became abundantly clear that Corvon wanted us to go through litigation in order to get anything out of this situation. Around this time is when me and Peyton had the idea of making the video that we uploaded that day. After this, Corvon had made clear to me that the reason he had called the police on Peyton was because he felt that he was going to become physically violent with Peyton. He later admitted this to me on the phone several times. While other conversations did take place, I feel no further need to include that in this video. There is literally nothing to go off of right now in regards to whether or not Peyton is guilty or innocent. They have as much evidence that he did it as he didn't, which is to say fucking nothing. They have nothing to go off of. The only thing that Peyton needs right now is money for an attorney. If you can do absolutely anything to help right now, it would be watch this video and herd out what the facts of the situation in regards to Peyton are right now. I made a change.org petition because Fulton County does not want to be looked into, and they don't want attention on what they're doing. I believe that if pressure is put on them, that they would have to release Peyton. In the meantime, the Cash App and Venmo are up and working again. You do have the means to help us out financially in any way. We are doing absolutely everything that we can right now to make sure that Peyton can get an attorney and that he can be released. I just want my friend back. I've learned a lot about the conditions of Fulton County, and they are fucking disgusting. Not only should Peyton not be in there, nobody should be in there. I definitely don't think personally that I'm gonna stop talking about Fulton County anytime soon. It's horrible. So if you wanted to do anything to help, it would be continuing to do what you can to help us so that we can afford an attorney and sign the change.org petition saying that Peyton should be released from jail. Donate to the GoFundMe. It's in Peyton's link tree. Same for the change.org petition. If possible, do what you can to spread this video so that more people can do the same. They have heard out what I have to say. As for everything else, it really doesn't matter right now in terms of what people are saying and doing. It's just not a part of this. Last thing I probably post about all of this, cannot stress this enough. I just want my fucking friend back. I want to get him out of this fucking jail. It is awful, and he should not be there. Whether or not you think he's guilty, Fulton County is disgusting. Thank you to people who have been sending nice messages both to Peyton and myself. I genuinely appreciate it. If Peyton is released and there is another comment, it will likely be from him. If not, I've said everything that there is to say. Please, if you can, donate. It would really be appreciated. And thank you.